Welcome! Today we will be making a recipe out of Alton Brown's cookbook, Everyday Cook, copyright 2016. We will be making the chicken piccata. Step 1 is to combine white wine, chicken broth, and lemon juice in a measuring cup and set aside. We do need to juice a lemon, so let's do that. Alton says it will take a half of a lemon to make 1.5 tablespoons of juice. Let's see if that is accurate. I have this juicer here that has this little top part here where you juice it, and then there's a spout to pour it out. If you want to know where to get a juicer like this, great question. I don't know. Mine is from my dead grandmother's house. It kind of looks like it has a newspaper logo on the side. I'm assuming she got it for free for signing up for the newspaper. I'm sure you can find something on Amazon if your grandmother hasn't passed away yet and you haven't got to rummage through her kitchen. I do have extra juice. I'm just going to save it. I don't know. I'll find a use for it. I just know that I'm more likely to use this in something than half a lemon. I know technically this is a half of a lemon, but when I'll need it, the process of juicing a lemon will just not happen. Next step, 3 ounces of wine. I'm going to say the name wrong, although I did take a whole wine class, so you think I would know how to say this. He recommends a Sauvignon Blanc. That might be right. It might not be. I went with the cheapest that Aldi's had to offer. It's just a hair over 3 ounces. I'm not super concerned about it. Next step, 4 ounces of chicken broth. This is also the cheapest Aldi's has to offer. Shit. I feel like it's more reasonable to spend money on better quality chicken broth. The wine I will only cook with because I only drink wine if it is very sugary, and that won't cut it. So we're talking Moscato levels of sugar. All right, those are combined and in a cup, so they're getting put off to the side for now. Next step, I need to get our chicken thighs out of the fridge. He says to use skinless, boneless chicken thighs. So he says to season them with salt and pepper. I'm just going to do that in the bag because I don't want to waste something with the dirty chicken juices all over it. All right, we're going to put salt and pepper on our boneless, skinless chicken thighs. He says to use freshly ground pepper. I don't do that. So we will be settling for this. And then kosher salt, which I do have. I'm just going to throw the salt and pepper in the bag and then kind of massage it in. I think that's the best course of action. I think ideally it would be best to lay them out on a plate or something and then kind of massage in the salt and pepper. I'm just going to hope for the best in the bag. Then he wants a half teaspoon of the pepper. He said you'll need more for serving also. Salt and pepper's in. I'm just going to try and add some air to the bag a little bit so that the chicken has a little bit of room to move around. All right, I'm going to have to take it out. My attempt to leave the chicken in the bag and salt and pepper is not working. The pepper is sticking too well. It looks like if I stuck with it a little bit longer, it might have worked out. But I want to make sure it's really well mixed because I'm going to have to bread these. So I don't want one piece to be horrifically covered in black pepper and you can't tell under the breading. Luckily, my husband and I are the only ones that'll be eating this, and we both tolerate spice. I tolerate it fine. He eats ghost peppers for fun, so this would be no problem for him. I feel like it's pretty well covered now, well incorporated, not big chunks anywhere. I didn't want to get chicken juices everywhere and be covered in them, is why I wanted to try and leave them in the bag. but that didn't work out. So I'm going to wash my hands and wipe this area down a little bit so I don't accidentally give my household salmonella. Our next step is to place the flour in a gallon freezer bag. We need 1 cup of all-purpose flour. I'm okay with it being just over a cup if you're not exact on measurements. I've made this recipe before and I feel like there is never enough flour in the bag. We'll see how it goes. I might have to add flour. We'll see. I have gotten a second plate. What he wants us to do is take one of these bad boys, throw them in the bag, seal it, shake it so it's well covered. I'm going to make sure it's flat in there first so I'm not making this harder than it needs to be. After shaking, remove air. Open bag just enough to remove air. So I guess I'm leaving the corner open because I don't want to leave the whole thing open. Flour will get everywhere. His instructions say flatten that sucker with a meat pounder. One downside of doing this with the flour in here is that when you flip it, because you do need to flip it at least once during the process, you kind of have to move the flour around so that you can see your piece of chicken, so that you're not just throwing your hammer full force against the counter. I'm going to double bag this. This is a problem I have when I tenderize meat. I don't know if it's me or my meat tenderizer, but there always seems to get holes in the bag, so I'm just going to double it up. I mean, overall, it's probably about 1/4 of an inch. All right, I'll take that out and set it to the side, and then I'll repeat this process 8 more times. I feel like there's been some exposed meat on the last 2 thighs I've taken out. And what I mean by that is when I take them out of the bag, there's some meat there that looks like it doesn't have any flour on it. So I went ahead and put that piece of meat back in there to make sure it was well coated enough. See, like that piece there, that looks like bare chicken to me. I'm going to throw it back in the bag to make sure it's well covered. See, just throwing it in there for a quick second covered that pretty well. After you have thoroughly got flour all over you and every cooking surface, the chicken is covered. I'm going to clean this up real quick before we do the next step. After you're done deflouring yourself, the next step is to use a heavy 12-inch straight side saute pan with a lid over high heat for 1 minute. I have that going on high heat. My stove is ancient. I feel like it takes a lot longer to heat things up. He could also be using gas, and I have an electric range. So I'm going to take this opportunity to prep some of the other stuff. I'm going to need oil and butter for when that hits heat. Thus, however much time I spend getting that oil and butter ready is how much time that's going to have to heat. The recipe as a whole asks for 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. This step only needs 2, kind of. I have 2 bowls here. What the process is going to be is we're going to add 1 tablespoon of the butter and the oil and let the butter bubble, and then add in 4 chicken breasts. After those 4 cook, we'll be adding in another tablespoon of butter and another tablespoon of oil, and then repeat. He says to use olive oil. I don't have olive oil, so we're going to use avocado oil. The smoke temperature of olive oil is lower than avocado oil. I don't think the substitution will be an issue. At best, it's just going to smoke less, is my thought on that. I could be wrong. I'm doing it that way so I don't have to pause each time and remeasure and recut butter. I can just dump it in and go. I realized that my microphone might have not been recording part of that. So I'm cooking this one big one by itself because my pan did not have enough room to do a batch of 4 like he wanted me to do. The 3 I've previously done, I've taken out and put to the side. He would like you to do 90 seconds about on each side, shaking it occasionally. This big boy, I'm going to do a little bit longer. I know the goal here is not to cook them. We'll be cooking them to completion in a sauce later. But since this one is so much larger than the other ones, I'm just giving him extra time. Also, my pan is raised in the middle. I don't know if you can see that. So the oil and butter like to pool out here. Thus, I'm trying to keep my pan scooted forward a little bit so that the heat is under here where I want it to be. So it gets that high heat like it needs, but then it's also sitting in the oil and butter. I'm going to pull this boy off. We are working with a very thin layer of breading since we just put a little bit of flour on it to shake it in the bag. So what I'm trying to do is not crowd it on the plate. I'm trying to give them enough room so that breading gets less soggy. Of course, it's going to get soggy. We're not going to put it on a drying rack or anything. I don't want them to steam each other a ton. He didn't say anything about that in the instructions, I don't think. At least I haven't read that part yet. But I'm just not crowding them on the plate. And then when I add the next batch on top, they should be cooled down some, that they get less soggy, hopefully. There's our next little portion. He says until the butter bubbles, which I would think technically that's bubbling, but I don't know if he meant like melted and bubbling. It's melted now, so we're going to throw it in. I would think if it's mostly melted and bubbling, it would probably be fine. I have to do a little bit rearranging here. My throwing wasn't the most precise. I'm trying not to crowd them too much. Same thing. I'm assuming we're going for a bit of a crispy crust, so I don't want them to crowd each other. I have this little chicken nugget kind of guy here. I don't know what I'm going to do with him. He's just getting thrown in the sauce, I think, and we'll see what happens. The instructions say that once you move the chicken out of the pan, you need to immediately add these mushrooms. Ideally, you would read the whole recipe before you tried to cook it. Ideally. That being said, he says 8 ounces of button mushrooms. This is what I got. Not quite button mushrooms. If you see a flashing light, you're not having a stroke. It looks like one of the fluorescent tubes in the light fixture above me has decided today, while I've started recording, not any time before this, just while I'm recording, that it's going bad. So that's why we're going to have some blinking, maybe. Our mushrooms are clean for the most part. I don't wash them. I was told you're not supposed to because it does something to the texture. I go through and bat off as much of the debris as I can. I know that they're grown in manure, but it's pasteurized, so any of the harmful germs should be killed in the pasteurization process. The recipe says to use button mushrooms, 8 ounces, and cut them thin. I don't believe these are button mushrooms. We don't have anything in the store labeled button mushroom. I looked at 3 or 4 different stores and did not see anything labeled button mushrooms. I could be thinking of the wrong thing, but I think button mushrooms are smaller than this. It says to cut them thin. So like these big boys here, I'm cutting them up a little bit. I cut them into quarters more or less. I did cut the stem off individually and cut it. And then I'm going thin slices like that. I'm trying to make them kind of even sizes so that they all cook the same. I'm just putting them in a bowl with the additional 1 tablespoon of butter so that I can throw them on the skillet when it's time. Apparently, I'm not supposed to add the 1 tablespoon of butter to this yet. I misread it. So I will set that over to the side for now. Let me add that back to height. The mix up with the butter is because the recipe says to add the remaining teaspoon of salt. I think my brain just auto-filled at remaining and filled in butter instead of salt. All right, we are back up to temp, as you can see. Pour those bad boys right in there. I need to cook for about 2 minutes. He says stirring or tossing to a saute for 2 minutes. We're aiming for golden brown. I'm not very good at tossing, so stirring it will be. I do like to stop every once in a while and kind of even these guys out in the pan. Since this pan isn't perfectly flat on the bottom, they do like to kind of move out towards the edges. The mushrooms have definitely reduced in size. I'm going to go ahead and do the next step. The next step is to stir the mushrooms out to the circumference of the pan and then pour the drained capers in the middle. These are mostly drained. There's a little bit of juice in there. I'm a little worried about that, but I don't know how you get all the juice out. Capers are pickled more or less, so they come in a jar of liquid. Once the capers are in, you're supposed to stir for another minute. It's been about 1 minute. I think we're looking pretty good here. I can definitely smell the capers. He says to add the chicken back into the pan, so we'll go ahead and do that. It's going to be crowded a little bit, and we're going to have to stack. I don't know that there's any way around that. Once the chicken's in, turn it to low. Next step is to distribute thinly sliced lemon across the top. That one's not super thin. He says to slice the lemon into 8 thin slices. I did more than that. I like lemon flavor though, and I didn't want to waste the lemon. We also need to add our broth mixture on there and then cover. That will cook like that for 5 to 7 minutes. While our chicken is cooking, I'm going to go ahead and get our garnish ready. He says to use flat leaf parsley. Nothing in the store was labeled flat leaf parsley. I know enough that I know curly parsley is not what he intended, so I did not get that. This is Italian parsley. I'm hoping this is what he meant, and it just goes by different names in different areas. I'm removing the stems. Since my chicken is stacked in the pan a little bit, I went ahead and moved the pieces that were on top to the bottom so that they got heat. I did leave the big piece on the bottom since it's huge. I want it to stay in contact with heat for as long as possible. That way we know it gets cooked well. We're supposed to finely chop these bad boys. So what I kind of do is kind of bunch them up in the middle for my first chop and then kind of go like that. I'm not trying to go super far between chops. I think it's fine enough. So I'll go ahead and get our 3 tablespoons. I'm probably not going to have 3 tablespoons worth, but I'm okay with that. I'm going to check the big chicken thigh to see how it's doing. All right, this is our big boy. I was able to cut him in half with a fork, so he's nice and tender. There's no pink left in there, so we'll evacuate the rest of these. We need to dispose of the lemon. So as I find lemon pieces, I'm just going to put them on the side of the plate I'm using. And then when all these thighs are out, I'll go throw the lemon slices in the trash. I need to turn this back to high heat now that all the chicken's out. I'm going to do that first and then go throw away my lemon chunks. I left 2 of these little chicken nuggets in there. I'll pull those out. I have thrown our last tablespoon of butter in, and I need to stir this bad boy consistently for 1 minute. That is about 1 minute. So I'm going to turn the heat off, remove this from the heat. There's our chicken piccata. I think she looks really good. She tastes very well also. I'll try and put a picture of Alton's on there. He didn't finely chop the parsley as much. I think the recipe was pretty easy to follow. It tastes really good. The lemon gives it almost a light taste. It says to pair it with rice and noodles, but that's a lot of food and only 2 people will be eating it, so we'll be eating on it for a while. Honestly, this is one of my favorite recipes, so I'd give it like a 9 out of 10. I definitely recommend you try it.